Shinobu is considered by many to be the weakest Hashira and Demon Slayer, and that, in itself, is a bit of a debatable statement, at least in my opinion. Today we're going to talk about the insect Hashira, my favorite among all the Demon Slayers, Shinobu Kocho. And we're going to analyze several topics, like her past, information from the databook, the symbolism of her attacks, her impact on the story, and also her true power level among the Hashira. Obviously, just like all the analyses on this channel, this video will have spoilers for the entire Demon Slayer series. So you've been warned. And because of that, if you like my videos and this topic, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We're almost at 100,000 subscribers, and if you really enjoy my content, consider becoming a member for as little as $1.99, basically the price of a cup of coffee for me, so don't waste any time. And shout out to all my awesome supporters, you guys are amazing. Now, let's get into the video. Shinobu Kocho, just like a large part of the Kimetsu cast, had a childhood marked by tragedy. When they were kids, she and her older sister, Kane, lost their parents during an Oni, or demon, attack, and were saved by the absolute GOAT, the super badass Jaumiai Haimajima, the Stone Hashira. After that, the two of them decided to become demon slayers to prevent other children from suffering the same fate. An altruistic ideal from two girls desperate because of the evils of the world. Kane, always kind and compassionate, the older sister, believed that even demons deserve mercy, and this ideal influenced Shinobu a bit, at least in shaping her mindset. Although, deep down, Shinobu carried a profound hatred and hid it quite often. Since that time, Shinobu was already suppressing her feelings toward the Oni so she could keep moving forward with a smile on her face. Over time, she had to deal with the most painful loss of her life. Kane, her sister, was mortally wounded by Douma, the upper moon too, and died in her arms, asking her to keep living with kindness. And that really reminds me of Akaza's own story, or Akasa, who also lost his father, whose last request was for him to live a good and happy life. It's really interesting to notice that the sources of Akaza and Shinobu's hatred are opposite, even though they're quite similar. Akaza lost his father to an illness and because he didn't have the money to treat it, and everything in his story was the fault of humans. To Akaza, humans were the humans who stopped him from saving his father, who poisoned the well, and who ended the lives of his father-in-law and his future wife. For Shinobu, the source of her hatred is the demons themselves, Onis whose very nature depends on devouring humans and taking pleasure in it all. And the enemy who devoured her sister was one of the most powerful and cynical, Douma, the upper moon too. Since then, Shinobu has kept her sister's sweet demeanor, imitating her charismatic and friendly way of carrying herself. But deep down, she was always driven by pain and the desire for revenge, which led her to develop her own fighting style. In this way, she trained and grew stronger, becoming the insect Hashira, a specialist in poisons and lethal techniques, always carrying the memory and dream of her older sister with her. She followed that example until the very end of her life. As a Hashira, Shinobu maintained a calm and friendly demeanor, even appearing lighthearted around her peers, but this behavior concealed both her inner rage and her pragmatism. She formed important bonds, such as with Kaneo Tsuyuri, the young girl she adopted as a younger sister and trained after Kane's death, repeating the role of her beloved older sister whom she so admired. This time, Shinobu was the older sister, and now she had someone to teach. The name of her late sister, Kane, is very similar to the name of her new adopted sister, Kaneo, and both are also written in similar ways in katakana. But if we write them in kanji, some possible translations could be Kane, which comes from something like fragrance or plant, a sprout. And her last name, as well as Shinobu's, is Kocho, which means something like foreign butterfly or something along those lines. From the very beginning, it shows that there's an implicit meaning in her name, and in the way these two are represented with flowers and insects, since the butterfly has that connection, right, the whole thing with pollen and the whole insect vibe. When interacting with Tanjiro, Shinobu found someone who, like Kane, believed in the goodness even of the demons. This ideology goes against everything Shinobu feels inside and in her deepest thoughts, and Tanjiro notices this, not exactly the conflict itself, but he senses that she's hiding something there, anger, frustration. Even with a smile on her face, imitating her sister's example and honoring her request to live a happy life, Shinobu still held on to resentment, and that wasn't genuine happiness. Her relationship with Jitomioka also stood out, because despite the teasing she directed at him, there was a mutual understanding between their solitary natures, both marked by pain. There are actually a lot of people who ship the two of them, and there's even a bit of a relationship there, especially in some things outside the main story. But anyway, I'm not going to get too deep into that. In the end, Her entire journey as a Hashira was defined by this contrast, the sweetness she inherited from her sister clashing with the vengeance that consumed her. Until, of course, it all culminated in her final battle against Douma, where she turned her own life into a weapon to fulfill the destiny she carried since childhood, in what I consider to be the best fight in Kimetsu no Yaiba. Not because of choreography or flashy elements, sparkles, or VFX. No, that's not it. For me, this is the best concept in Kimetsu no Yaiba. The Hashira who gives everything she has, even her own body, to carry out a revenge that isn't just hers. And now let's talk a little more in depth about Shinobu's concepts, before we get into the part of the fight that I consider to be really, really good. First of all, out of all the elements we have in Kimetsu, water, fire, earth, air, why was Shinobu designated as the insect Hashira? And to talk about this, we need to understand the origin of breathing techniques. Insect breathing is a specialization of flower breathing, which itself is already a branch. Kane, Shinobu's older sister, mastered this breathing technique, and her fighting style was based on it. The flower breathing style is a derivative of water breathing, which itself comes from sun breathing. So there's a whole path to trace before we get to Shinobu. The primordial sun breathing gave rise to water breathing, which then led to flower breathing, as one of the specializations that Kane followed. Kane used this breathing style, which was very focused on agility and precision, since most of her techniques were characterized by extremely fast movements and high accuracy, especially because it greatly enhanced the user's visual perception. Later on, Kane, Shinobu's younger and adoptive sister, comes to use an ability called Ringen Shugan, which translates to something like the Crimson Eye that sees beyond. And this ability, we're going to talk a lot about it in this video, basically lets Kane see the whole world in slow motion, kind of like a Sharingan, but at the cost of risking her own eyesight, which I actually think is pretty balanced. So, in exchange for one eye, she drastically increases her vision and perception of everything around her. The insect breathing. As far as I've seen, we don't have any other breathing style that's derived from another breathing style, which makes Shinobu's fighting style a specialization of a specialization. It's something very, very specific. Shinobu is the only user of this insect breathing, and she's also its creator. The creation of this breathing style basically consists of an adaptation of Shinobu's body, which was very small and fragile, especially compared to normal demon slayers. That's the symbolism with insects. Even though they're weak and fragile, they can have surprising attributes, like piercing or even poisonous attacks. And that's the foundation of Shinobu's fighting style. Her hands were smaller, and she didn't have enough strength to decapitate demons like the other slayers. Because of that, the techniques of the insect breathing style are mainly based on speed and precision, much like flower breathing, but it also focuses a lot on slashes and stabs to inject poisons and toxins. With this additional aspect, Shinobu gains a significant advantage, weakening her opponents and creating openings for other types of follow-up attacks. Shinobu's own sword is designed to mimic a stinger, and for that reason, the sheath is where she stores the various different poisons she mixes, so that the demon systems can't fully adapt to the substances, even with their accelerated regeneration. Combine this high lethality with Shinobu's speed and precision, which are no joke either, and you have a really great support to have by your side. On top of that, she has a high level of acceptance and closeness among the Hashiras, reaching 85% acceptance, according to the databook, of course. And she's also ranked as the third easiest Hashira to talk to, so her communication with others is really good. I think she would make a great support. According to the fan book, we can also see that she's the fourth fastest among the Hashiras in a straight line race, only behind Yuzuri, Sanemi, and Jyomiai, who are also insanely fast. Her speed is compromised when it comes to long-distance endurance runs, since, as we mentioned earlier, her physical constitution isn't the best. So, for short sprint runs, she's definitely one of the fastest, perfect for quick fights and thrust attacks. Because of her debuff skill set, due to the poison, her speed, and her closeness with her teammates, she easily stands out as the best support among the hunters, at least in my opinion. I think that if she lands her poison, she can create really good openings for anyone else to finish off upper moons. She could take down strong upper moons from 1 to 3, but for that, she needs to land her attack. Now let's talk a bit about the techniques of her insect breathing. Starting with Cho no Mai, Tawamir. No Mai means dance in Japanese, so each of Shinobu's styles refers to a different dance. The first one we have here is the butterfly dance, Tawamir, where Tawamir means playfulness or whimsy. It's one of her lightest attacks, suggesting that death comes in an almost playful way, like a dance in disguise. Especially since Tawamir means playfulness, so it's as if she's just playing, but it's still a deadly attack. And of course, the butterfly symbolism is connected to her sister and also to her last name. Maybe this is one of the attacks most closely connected to flower breathing. But that's just my assumption. Haga no mai manabiki. From butterfly we went to bee, which is ho, and that means dance of the bee sting, the true foal. Ho means bee and jie means prey. In this sense, we have a piercing and direct attack, like a bee sting. And part of true bending in this sense, which comes from manabiki, can symbolize the opponent being forced to yield or falling, right? Bending in the face of an inevitable attack. Sirai no mai Fukugen Rokaku. Dragonfly dance, compound dihexagon. Here we have the image of the dragonfly as the main insect of the moment. A very fast insect with a multifaceted vision. The attacks in this dance are exactly like that, varied, fast, and hitting several different points, with great precision. Similarly to flower breathing, once again, insect breathing also has this aspect of precision and attacks focused on vision. So, it strikes from various angles and different points. And finally, we have my favorite attack in Demon Slayer, which also happens to be from my favorite Hashira, obviously, right? Shinobu, man, she's just amazing. But anyway, this attack isn't anything special, it's just one I really like, which is Goku no Mai, Hayakosoku Jabara. The centipede dance, 100-legged zigzag. Goku means centipede, Hayakosoku literally means 100 legs, and Jabara means undulation, something like an accordion or a zigzag. It's an attack I thought was really cool because it's specific, underground, and also because it mimics the crawling movements of a centipede. In Kimetsu, we have a lot of really flashy and, impressive attacks, and many are way better than this one. But I really like this one, mainly because of its simplicity and because it's something so different, something I didn't expect Shinobu to have. Several attacks in a row coming from below, in a zigzag pattern, that basically destroyed an entire bridge, and also looked really beautiful in the animation. It really did justice to the character's aggressive violence, tied to the image of a centipede. Now let's talk a bit more about the poison. Shinobu's poisons are mainly made with wisteria to fight against demons. Wisteria is a substance derived from flowers that exist in real life and are also toxic, being cultivated in several different countries, mainly across Asia. The poison made from wisteria is capable of weakening an Oni's regeneration, as well as their movements, their perception and reaction speed, and it also weakens their Keki Jutsu. In fact, wisteria was also used at the end of the story as a kind of antidote against the Oni, where the target could return to their human form if hit by the antidote. Kaneo uses this to put an end to Muzan, while also bringing Tanjiro back to his humanity. All of this is richly represented by the flower itself, which also does justice to its symbolism of longevity, fertility, and so on. I thought that was really cool. It's also interesting to see how Shinobu is considered the weakest of the Hashira and yet the most lethal against humans, right? Because an injection of this poison could easily kill a human due to the dosage and the mixture. Another detail I haven't mentioned yet is the composition of the poison in Shinobu's own body, since she spent a year injecting poison into herself and adapting it to every fiber of her being. But we'll talk more about that now as we get into her fight against Douma. Shinobu's fight against Douma, for me, is the best fight in Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba. Or at least it's my favorite, but I think it's really, really good. There are a lot of parallels between Shinobu and Douma in the sense that both are cynical characters who hide their true feelings behind fake smiles and deceptive expressions. Of course, for totally different reasons. Shinobu tries to mask her anger and frustration with a demeanor very similar to that of her late older sister, while Douma tries to act as expected of a religious leader, with charisma, smiles, and a gentle way of speaking. But the main factor that sets the two apart is mainly the empathy that comes from loss. Douma is incapable of feeling the weight of death. This has followed him since he was a human, a child, to be more specific. He didn't feel true empathy or understand the weight of death. And this was evident even when he lost his parents. He saw death as a form of deliverance and felt sorry for those who suffered so much in life because they didn't understand what, to him, was an absolute truth. Douma's truth is that there was no life after death, or any meaning in life itself. He didn't have that sense of tact or emotion. Ever since he was human, he always had a demon's mentality, so he always pretended and imitated human feelings to deceive them and maintain his authority among them. On the other hand, Shinobu masked her pain from having lost everyone she loved, her parents, her sister, her disciples, everything. The demons took all of that from her. Shinobu feels the weight of every death as a growing accumulation of anger. She was deeply scarred by Douma in particular, a demon who prefers to devour females because they are extremely rich in nutrients, which, in the end, turned out to be a great irony for the demon, since his fate was sealed because of that. The fate of Douma and Shinobu was always intertwined by causality, with Douma being one of, if not the main catalyst for all of Shinobu's hatred. And in a way, they are quite the opposites. Shinobu's innermost truth is that she has a certain degree and a complex of inferiority, in which she blames herself for being weak, not only for not having the physical build to decapitate demons, but also for not being able to protect those she loves. Which is completely the opposite of Douma, who has a high degree of megalomania, seeing himself as superior to all humans, being a religious authority figure who is also praised by many around him. Douma feels no pain for others, and his principles are entirely selfish. This difference and contrast between enemies is really beautiful, in my opinion, and it makes this fight much richer. I've already talked a lot about this conflict in the old video I made about Douma, but I plan to remake that video in the future for technical improvements and all that, you know. It was one of my first videos here on the channel. Anyway, the fight isn't very long, and it basically consists of Shinobu testing the effectiveness of her poisons on Upper Moon 2. And the whole battle is a fight of speed versus Kekijutsu. In fact, Douma's own cynicism is something that also makes him test and feel the poisons for his own pleasure. That is, of course, until Shinobu has nothing left to do and nothing left in her arsenal. Completely wounded, she resorts to the plan of poisoning Douma with the venom from her own body. Douma's life philosophy was based on the principle of devouring mainly women, and that created enemies like Inosuke himself. Besides, of course, it made Douma rise very quickly in the demon hierarchy. To give you an idea, he surpassed the Kaza, even though a Kaza was turned into a demon first. So, he managed to win the power race. Douma devouring women because they were nutritious, and then dying because of the nutrients in Shinobu's flesh, is a pretty ironic end for the character, since he died because of his own gluttonous nature. And I've already mentioned here that some of the upper moons also strongly represent the 7 deadly sins, and I think Douma's deadly sin would be gluttony, right? Even the tips of Shinobu's nails were coated with deadly poison, a much larger amount than anything Douma had ever consumed. And that was enough to seriously damage Douma's body from the inside out, bringing about his end. This strategy would hardly have worked on another demon like Akaza, who wouldn't devour females, or Kokoshibo, who wouldn't stop the fight just to eat his opponent right there. Inosuke and Kaneo were also essential during this fight and complemented the theme very well. Inosuke had his mother devoured, and Kaneo sacrificed one of her eyes to avenge her adoptive sister, while Inosuke also completed his character arc there by avenging his mother. And later Kaneo sacrificed her other eye to save Tenjiro. One eye to avenge, and the other to save. The good thing is that Kaneo's act of vengeance also allowed Shinobu to rest in peace, since she put an end to Douma, and he said that all the souls he devoured lived inside him. So, they could never rest in peace. Shinobu was crucial in defeating Douma, in fact, but she was the pillar that supported the others so they could finish him off and thus completely fulfill the vengeance of several people at once. And seriously, this is a part of Temetsu that I really like. Another interesting thing I've seen people mention is about Shinobu not acquiring the mark against Douma, and to me that's totally fine. Shinobu probably doesn't have a body strong enough to withstand the massive increase in temperature generated during the process of obtaining the mark. And besides, she also didn't get to train during the Hashira training arc. Besides, in my opinion, that could even interfere in some way with the effectiveness of the poison inside her body. I don't know, maybe the temperature goes up and changes the composition or reduces its effectiveness. Of course, that's just a guess, but I think it simply wasn't worth the risk. But anyway, the fight ends with Shinobu holding Douma's head in her hands, and she's really happy for achieving her goal and finally being able to rest in peace. It's pretty ironic to see her holding Douma's head, even though she wasn't the one who cut it off, since that was her character's weakness. And I thought that was really, really good. At the same time, Douma finally feels something real, which is love, a fulfilled revenge, and a good ending for Douma. Once again, a very interesting contrast to observe at the end of it all. But yeah, about Shinobu, I think that's it. Man, this ending was actually pretty quick. I thought it was really good. The anime gave it a nice focus too, but yeah. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and drop a nice comment down below. We're in this together. That's it. Let me know who you think the next Hashira is going to be. That's it, guys. Thanks to you. We're in this together, and bye.